The Rainy Streets of Lima. The story of Tiffany Crowley. Lima, Ohio, a quiet town that, for the most part, went unnoticed by the rest of the country. The people who lived there loved its simplicity, the kind of place where you knew your neighbors and your children grew up with theirs. But in the early 2000s, Lima became the center of a dark and terrifying story that would haunt the town forever. A story about Tiffany Crowley, the unassuming woman who would come to be known as the Midnight Killer. Tiffany was 35 years old, a widow working the graveyard shift for a popular but unnamed physical security company. She worked the overnight desk in a suburban office park just outside Lima. Every night she sat alone in the quiet lobby, watching monitors and walking the darkened hallways. She had a stern demeanor but kept to herself, which made her largely invisible to her co-workers. But there was something deeply unsettling beneath that calm exterior. Something broken, something hungry for control. Before she was the subject of local infamy, Tiffany was just a woman trying to rebuild her life after tragedy. Her husband, Daniel Crowley, died in a tragic car accident in 2009. He had been her rock, and when he was gone, it felt like the world had crumbled. One of the few things she kept after his death was an old ratchet he used to keep in his car. He had given it to her as a gift, saying, "You never know when you'll need to fix something." It was a symbol of the safety she had once felt with him, a totem that she kept in the driver's side door of her own car, a constant reminder of her loss. But Tiffany's life took a sharp turn in 2015, when a series of unexplained deaths began to terrorize Lima. 3 bodies were found in less than a year, each victim killed in a horrifying and personal way. At first, no one linked the deaths to Tiffany. She was quiet, professional, and barely noticed. But those who knew her closely could see the change, the growing darkness in her eyes, and the increasing distance she kept from others. What no one could have imagined was the monster that lurked inside her, a monster that thrived on violence and vengeance. The first kill, a fight that ended in murder. Tiffany's first victim was Janet Meadows, a local woman who worked in the same office park. The two had never gotten along. Janet was loud, opinionated, and frequently clashed with Tiffany during their brief interactions. On a particularly stormy day in August of 2015, the two had a heated argument. Janet had made a passing remark about Tiffany's cold demeanor, mocking her in front of others in the break room. Tiffany said nothing in return, but her rage was boiling beneath the surface. That night, as the rain poured down in heavy sheets and the streets became slick with water, Tiffany saw Janet walking to her car in the empty lot. It was late, well past midnight, and the parking lot was deserted. Tiffany had stayed after her shift, sitting in her car, waiting, watching. The ratchet Daniel had given her was resting in the driver's side door, as it always was. As Janet made her way to her car, umbrella barely shielding her from the downpour, Tiffany revved her engine. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her heart pounding as she saw her enemy's silhouette through the rain. Without hesitation, she slammed her foot on the gas pedal. The car sped through the parking lot, the sound of tires skidding on wet pavement deafening against the storm. Janet never saw it coming. Tiffany's car struck her with brutal force, sending her body flying several feet before landing in a crumpled heap near the curb. Tiffany didn't stop. She ran over Janet's body once more before speeding out of the lot, leaving her dead in the rain. The investigation ruled Janet's death as a tragic accident, a pedestrian hit by an unknown driver on a rainy night. The police had no leads, and there were no witnesses. It seemed like an unfortunate coincidence, and no one suspected Tiffany. She went to work the next night as if nothing had happened, sitting quietly at her desk, watching the security monitors in the dimly lit lobby. The second victim, a gruesome execution. After the thrill of that first kill, Tiffany became addicted to the feeling of power. It wasn't long before she found her next victim. This time it was Peter Riley, a delivery driver who worked the night shift, frequently dropping off packages at the office park where Tiffany worked. Peter had always been polite to Tiffany, but on one particular night he made a comment that triggered something dark inside her. He had remarked how lonely her job must be, and something about the way he said it, with a slight smirk, got under her skin. Tiffany followed Peter home that night, tailing him in her car with the ratchet resting beside her. She watched him park in his driveway, and as soon as he got out of the vehicle, she attacked. Using the ratchet her late husband had given her, Tiffany bludgeoned Peter in the head. The first strike stunned him, and the second knocked him to the ground. But Tiffany didn't stop. She brought the heavy tool down again and again, blood splattering across her clothes and the pavement as she brutally beat him to death. When she was done, Peter's face was unrecognizable. The police found Peter's body the next morning, but with no evidence linking Tiffany to the crime, it was ruled a random act of violence, another case that went unsolved. She felt invincible. The small, timid woman who had once been a grieving widow was now a predator, thriving on the chaos she left in her wake. The third and final kill. The price of suspicion. Tiffany's third and final victim was Rebecca Nolan, a fellow security officer at the same company. Rebecca had grown suspicious of Tiffany's increasingly erratic behavior. She noticed how Tiffany seemed to linger in the parking lot after her shifts, how she avoided making eye contact, and how she seemed colder and more detached than ever. Rebecca wasn't one to ignore her instincts. She began asking questions, digging into Tiffany's past, and quietly voicing her concerns to her co-workers. Tiffany could sense that Rebecca was getting too close, and in her mind there was only one way to stop her. Late one night in December of 2015, Tiffany followed Rebecca after their shift. Rebecca had always been cautious, but on that night she was tired and didn't notice Tiffany's car tailing her in the darkness. Tiffany waited until they were on a secluded road just outside of town. Then, in one swift motion, she rammed Rebecca's car off the road and into a ditch. The crash wasn't enough to kill her, so Tiffany got out of her car, ratchet in hand. As Rebecca crawled out of her vehicle, dazed and bleeding, Tiffany struck her. It was a cold, calculated act, just like the others. She left Rebecca's body on the side of the road and drove away into the night, as if nothing had happened. The arrest and unveiling of the Midnight Killer. Rebecca's death raised suspicions. Unlike the other victims, Rebecca had told her close friends about her concerns regarding Tiffany. When investigators looked into it, they found enough circumstantial evidence to bring Tiffany in for questioning. Under pressure, her calm exterior finally cracked. During the interrogation, Tiffany confessed to all 3 murders. The cold, emotionless woman the town had known for years revealed her darkest secrets, detailing how she had killed each victim with chilling precision. Her reasoning was simple. They had crossed her, and she couldn't let them get away with it. Each kill was a means of taking control, of silencing those who had wronged her. The ratchet, the gift from her late husband, had become her weapon of choice. It was her connection to the life she once had, a tool of both love and violence. In 2016, Tiffany Crowley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lima, Ohio, would never forget the quiet, unassuming woman who became one of the town's most notorious killers. Even now, years later, the rainy nights in Lima seem darker, and the memory of Tiffany Crowley haunts the streets she once prowled in the dead of night.